I think it's pretty much safe to say that by now, most people understand what it is that I'm saying, and whether they agree or not, if they grant me my presuppositions, they really don't have an argument, right? My presupposition, one of them being that this entire planet is privately owned, right? If you grant me that, then obviously we live in a capitalist system. The whole world is capitalist. Now, as I pointed out, there's some gray area, right? Like some land isn't totally or not yet privately owned. Like the Middle East for a long time was like the wild, wild west, right? I mean, as a private individual or a community, you could have owned a tank, any kind of weapon you wanted. You could have owned a fucking bomber and whatever you wanted to own, you could have owned. You could have owned a nuke if those things exist, right? If you wanted to, as a private individual, right? Complete and utter freedom. Now, I'm not saying that I'm for that necessarily, but shit, I mean, compared to what we got today, why not? I'm not scared. You scared? I'm not scared. So, this whole like nation building, or for example, what the Western world did in Libya or Haiti, right? What they did is they went in there and they spread capitalism, right? Whereas you could have said that there was, yeah, maybe Libya had a king, if you will, right? Maybe Haiti was just wasn't. Um, Maybe they were trying to be capitalist or have a king, and the same could be said about the Middle East, right? There just wasn't enough of a power structure to really impose any kind of a system, right? And there are still places in the world like that. And I think the countryside, the boondocks, to a large degree, will remain that forever, right? We shall see. But so just because certain places the global power structure isn't able to go into and completely control, right? That doesn't mean that that shit's not privately owned or that it's not on its way there. It just hasn't been buttoned up, right? This system, this capitalism is what they are calling it now, right? This great reset. It's going to be the culmination of capitalism or global communism. I mean, Marx told you many, many years ago that we need capitalism to bring this in, right? And you could change the name all that you want, but ultimately, it's capitalism, right? So I'm hearing now that corporations aren't capitalists, right? That they're socialist. In what way, shape, or form is a private company socialist? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Does the public have any say in these private entities? No, they're private entities. Just because a bunch of capitalists, right, who privately own capital, land, right? Just because they get together, which is the freedom that capitalism gives them, right? Well, when you own private land, right? When the land is privately owned, that means you could do whatever the fuck you want to do with it, right? That's capitalism. So if you choose to incorporate or work together with other people, other entities, other capitalists toward a common goal, that's still not socialism because that still excludes the majority or everybody else, right? If you're a capitalist in the capitalist system, which gives you freedom to do as you wish with your capital, doing as you wish with your capital, well, that's not capitalism all of a sudden. No, this is what I've been talking about forever. This is the logical extension of this sick worldview that is capitalism. A system in which capital is privately owned. All of it. I know it doesn't say that specifically when you look up capitalism because it might make you think about how fucked up that sort of a system is. Explain to me how capitalists in a capitalist system that allows them to do as they wish with their capital begin to do as they wish with their capital, and all of a sudden that becomes not capitalism. Look, some capitalists could, and I guess Henry Ford did that to a degree, he could decide to profit share with his employees, right? And some other capitalists who, might feel threatened by this sort of move because they might start feeling guilty, or they're going to start losing their best workers, right? They'll just label it as socialism. If the underpinnings of the system are capitalist, how can it be anything other than capitalism? How? Ultimately, Henry Ford could withdraw those privileges. After all, Henry Ford isn't recognizing those people natural rights, right? He is allowing them certain privileges, but ultimately he's still the boss man. He's still privately owning the factories, the land, and what have you, right? And at any point in time, he can withdraw those privileges. So just because he grants certain people certain privileges, that doesn't make the system a socialist system. Just because he's a benevolent tyrant, that doesn't mean he's not a tyrant anymore. Just because he is a nice authoritarian, well, he's still an authoritarian. And this is the problem with these certain ideologies like capitalism, which is an ideology. If you're not even willing to accept that right off the bat, well, then we can't even have a conversation. It is an ideology, right? And it's anti-natural law, which is the problem with ideologies, because you have all these people who are pro-capitalism, whether they know it or not, contradict themselves by saying that they also support natural law, right? Natural human rights, God-given rights. What? That doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction. So you have to take these ideas and carry them out to their logical conclusion to see if they are valid, right? So again, capitalism doesn't say that, well, some capital is privately owned and not other. No. Means of production are privately owned. So if there's a mean of production out there, it's privately owned. That's capitalism. If you have a mean of production out there that's not privately owned in the milieu where everything else, all other means of production are privately owned, then that's not pure capitalism, right? It's 99.999% capitalist system. And again, obviously I'm oversimplifying for the sake of the conversation, because the argument, because that's where the world is headed, right? They're buttoning up capitalism, global capitalism, where everything is privately owned, all the means of production are privately owned, right? And then they could do whatever they want to do with everything because they own it privately, right? If this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that capitalism, right? I do as I wish with my private property, right? YouTube is a private business. They don't have to respect natural human right, free speech, right? So if the entire planet is finally dominated by capitalists and they button this whole system up, then there will be no free speech unless they choose to give it to us. But we will no longer, right? This is what you're saying. This is the logical conclusion of global capitalism. And you could put other names on it. You could call it communism. You could call it, state socialism or corporatism. Whatever the fuck you want to call it, go on ahead. But the foundation of the system is capitalist, right? Means of production and privately owned. That's it. What's so difficult to get about this? It's pretty simple. And so again, for capitalists to talk about natural law or God-given human rights, well, I'm not going to pull any fucking punches. They're just idiots. They're incoherent idiots. It's like pro-choice people talking about freedom, right? Freedom, freedom, freedom. What if we take their worldview and carry it out to its logical conclusion where, just hypothetically, every woman gets an abortion from now on because that's her natural God-given right to be free, right? Well, that's going to wipe us off the planet, right? And what about the freedom of all the people that have yet to come to be born? That have yet to be born, right? What about their freedom, right? It doesn't make any sense to say that this is freedom when you're literally taking some people's freedom away. But this is the logical, extension, carrying out pro-choice to its logical conclusion, hypothetically speaking, right? You're claiming to be pro-freedom, but if we go all the way in that direction, we're going to kill freedom. We're going to commit collective suicide as a race, as a species, right? I suppose that's our freedom to do that, but everybody doesn't want that. Other people's wish, desire is to live, right? But they don't have that freedom anymore because freedom. This is the nonsense. And the same goes for capitalism, or these capitalists talking about natural rights. So what are natural rights? Or God-given rights? But just to button up what I was talking about, yeah, of course, if it makes you feel good, you could change the name of the thing that capitalism results in. The logical conclusion of capitalism, if it makes you feel better, yeah, you could change the name of the thing that it turns into. But again, if the foundation is capitalist, and if you're saying that all means of production, no, that's what it is. That's what capitalism is. All means of production are privately owned, and you could do with private property as you wish, which is what I've been hearing from capitalists my entire fucking life, right? Then obviously, once a piece of land becomes private, that person doesn't have to sell it to anybody, right? They could keep it in the family or for themselves forever. And I mean, that's why they invented this capitalist system and sold you this idea. So that they could obviously, the goal of the capitalist is to accumulate capital, right? I mean, how is this difficult, people? So once all the land is accumulated and in the hands of the few, right? They incorporate, they join forces, then there's no more land for anybody else. Unless they choose to sell it to you. But who bought the land initially? Why should you even be able to buy or sell land? Right? But so basically a capitalist system disenfranchises, as I've stated many times in the past, will naturally disenfranchise somebody. Right? And the more capitalist this world is, right? Because people are greedy, because people like to hoard, because people don't like to share. Or all you need is enough highly motivated people because a lot of people probably do like to share. Most people probably do like to share. Sharing is caring, right? Socialism! You can't share! Right? You're evil! Sharing is evil! It's idiocy, right? But because enough of highly motivated individuals are fucking greedy, eventually, given enough time, they'll own everything, right? And disenfranchise everybody else. And that's capitalism, right? If I own something privately, I'm not obligated to let you use it, to sell it to you, anything, right? Total and utter control. That's the logical extension of capitalism. Again, if you want to call it something else because you want to alleviate guilt for having supported this devilish system, then go on ahead. But let's recognize where this shit comes from. So, natural law is a system of law based on a close observation of human nature and based on values intrinsic to human nature that could be deduced and applied independent of positive law. According to natural law theory, all people have inherent rights. conferred not by act of legislation, but by God, nature, or reason, right? I'll accept any of those. So, do we have the right to live, right? Well, obviously. Do we have the right to feed ourselves, right? In order to live, we need to be able to feed ourselves, yeah? Okay. Obviously, right? That's our natural right, to feed ourselves. How do we feed ourselves? Well, we need to own, whether privately or collectively, we need to own capital, right? A piece of land. In order to feed yourself on this planet, yourself, without having to, if you want to rely on someone else, that's fine. That should be your choice. But if I don't, I have the natural right, it's God's law, that I can feed myself. And in order for me to be able to feed myself, I need to be able to own land. Be able to have dominion over at least a small piece of land. Right? Because whether I want to grow my own food or I want to produce something else that I sell and or trade for the food that somebody else is growing on a piece of land that they have dominion over, right? If you take away my ability to own the land, then I can no longer feed myself. Be independent. I'm dependent on something, and this is the goal. That's why Bill Gates is buying up all the land that he can. That's what capitalists have always been doing forever. So that you can't feed yourself, you're dependent on them, the dole. You're dependent on the privileges that they give you. You no longer have any rights. There's nothing in the way of natural law, right? We all have a God-given right to be able to feed ourselves. And in order to be able to feed ourselves, we need to own capital. At the very least, for the duration of our lives. Why is this so difficult? So whenever a capitalist or a capitalist talks about natural law, but he's pro-capitalism all the way, well, that's a contradiction. Right? Because in a purely capitalist system where everything is privately owned, somebody's going to get excluded from being able to provide for themselves. They're going to have to depend on the capitalist, someone else that owns the land. Right? If all the land is privately owned, then you can no longer freely travel. I mean, you could if they let you. But then they could say, border. How do you on the one hand talk about natural law and then support borders? Like, how brainwashed do you have to be? You're literally telling me that I can't walk from here to over there. I can't walk there, right? Like, what? Because natural law, we support natural law, right? What about passports? What about IDs? What about the census? Wait. Why do I need a little booklet to be able to go from here to there? Why do I need to identify myself in order to purchase something? Why does every single one of my transactions have to be recorded somewhere? Right? These are just means of control, but because people are every generation is born into a new normal with new rules, fundamentally, I see no difference between just a passport and a health passport. What's the difference, right? You gotta brainwash people to accept a passport so that they could accept a health passport. Obviously. Passports hadn't always existed. They're roughly about a century old only. What do you mean? You need to know who I am, what I weigh, what my blood type is, my height, my eye color, exactly what I look like, how much body fat percent. Like, that's what passports are, right? From the very beginning, they were biometric, and they're carrying out this idea to its logical conclusion. Health passport. It's just another type of a biometric passport. In order to pass a port, they need to know everything about you. I mean, they fucking take photos of you naked already. I mean, right? Freedom. We're pro freedom. Build the wall. Like, you're an idiot. Now, you may have a certain idea about how a country should be run because that's what they brainwashed you with, right? You may think that you need borders to keep all the bad people out. When all that you're doing is keeping all the bad people locked in with all the good people, not allowing the good people to GTFO if they choose to do that, right? What right does anybody have to tell me that I can't walk from here to there? Right? So this whole idea about building the wall, that was just a step in the process of brainwashing everybody. I've been telling you this forever. Every single wall serves a dual function. To keep people out, but to also keep people in. Are you really that afraid of your fellow human beings that you want to lock yourself in? This is look at what they've done to us. They've locked us all in. And that's why people accepted it, because you were pushing the wall, because you're pushing private property, because you're saying everything is privately owned because capitalism. And yes, YouTube could stifle your free speech because it's a private property. I've been telling you this for years. Everything is private property. And now we're seeing the culmination of capitalism, right? No free speech. I mean, you still have some here and there. I mean, how can they really stop you from speaking freely, right? Well, by muzzling you. People can no longer speak freely, and they accept it. They choose. I mean, so many people think that they could have an intelligible conversation when they're wearing like 3 layers of various, fabric over their face. Borders. Right? Evolution. We're literally turning back into fucking dumbass fucking monkeys. While they're telling you, and I know I'm all over the place now, going on a huge fucking tangent. They're telling you that like people back in the day were dumber than they are today. Really? Really? It's weird because somehow they didn't allow themselves to be dominated and controlled the way they are today, but they were dumber? Are you kidding me? How would a dumb motherfucker know? Well, I guess he wouldn't. Just how fucking dumb he is. How would he? Right? But it makes him feel good to call everybody else dumb. Fuck out of here. So, capitalists, for the most part, are incoherent. They don't seem to understand what the worldview results in. Because at the same time, they seem to be promoting natural law while killing it. Right? If I have a God-given right to live, which all of us would agree that I do, right? So long as I'm not hurting anybody. What that necessitates, in order for me to live, I need to be able to feed myself. No, not be dependent on someone to feed me or give me a handout, right? Like UBI. I need to be able to feed myself. And if I cannot own land or be able to work a piece of land without giving anybody anything for it, then my God-given rights are being taken away from me, obviously, right? Now, we don't know how life on this planet started, but I think all of us agree that at some point, there weren't that many of us here, and we lived, in small groups, far apart from one another, and we had dominion over the land, right? We hunted, we grew things, we did whatever we needed to do to survive. Which isn't to say that that was utopia, or that it was perfect, or that there was no quote-unquote crime or evil being done, right? I'm not saying that, obviously. But how is it different today? Oh, right, it's not. There's probably more people being murdered today than there were back in those days. But anyway, we had all of us had dominion over at least a certain piece of this planet, right? Naturally. And then capitalism came in and started taking that away from us. Obviously, right? Oh, well, you can't grow vegetables in your back garden. No, that's illegal. You can't buy seeds because all the private companies own all the seed, or they're the only ones allowed to buy and sell things. You have to use our money to buy and sell things, right? Again, the system isn't completely buttoned up yet, but that's where it's headed. Capitalism. Oh, doesn't that sound great? Logical extension of capitalism, right? Where you own nothing because somebody already owns it, because private property. Duh. Like, I don't understand how people could be so brainwashed to not understand these simple, self-evident, basic truths, where they could say that they're pro-capitalism and then natural law at the same time. So, while Johnny the Caveman was running around bashing his wife over the head with the, yeah, right. Who believes this fucking nonsense, right? Dragging women into caves and raping. Like, who? Really? No. Don't go back to your natural state, right? No, you were dumb. You were evil. And we were exactly the same. Anyway, just a lot smarter, probably. I mean, most people, you put them out in wilderness, they won't be able to survive a day or two, right? So how fucking intelligent can you really be? So, we, in our natural state, nobody really owned any private property. I mean, if you had a certain tool or whatever, yeah, but insofar as land, you had dominion over that where you lived. And this planet is plenty big for all of us to be able to do that. Because any environment can only sustain as much life as it can. Natural law, right? There's no such thing as overpopulation. Because as soon as we start running out of resources, people start dying. So there can be no overpopulation. It's impossible to overpopulate the planet. It doesn't exist. This sort of thing, it's nonsense. It's for fucking dummies, right? Get an aquarium, all right? Put a breeding pair of fish in there, some guppies or something, and see how they overpopulate. They're not going to be able to. Because however much oxygen is in that water is going to be able to support that much life. However much food is in that water, that's how much life it's going to be able to support. It's not going to be like, how dumb can people be to fall for this nonsense? You know what I mean? So the planet is big enough to sustain all of us in exactly the number that it can sustain. Plagues, cataclysms, natural disasters, wars, all of that is cleansing. Look, the universe is fine-tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Stop trying to play God. Somebody already did all that, right? Let it be. It'll be just fine. But, in our natural state, we had dominion over at least some plot of land, and we used that to feed ourselves. And slowly and surely, that's been taken away from us by war, conquest, right? Private. This is private. No, you can't hunt in the king's forest. Private, right? Capitalism. If you're gonna plant corn on king's land, private land, You have to give the king 50 bushels for, every 100 that you produce. Because capitalism, private, this is private. I don't know how some people still don't get it. They're just ideologically committed to capitalism. Now, again, I think it's necessary for us to own property, all of us, right? But that also necessitates certain rules, right? Certain land has to be a common, right? In order for us to be able to move around freely, land has to be owned by all of us. Americans, Mexicans, none of this country bullshit. That's not globalism. That is not globalism. Silly rabbits. Look at where globalism is getting you. More and more borders, more and more closures, less and less movement. That's globalism. Duh. Right? So, basically, this whole planet is ours. All of us. I could go anywhere I want. So long as I'm not, trampling the grass that your cattle are eating or stomping your fucking carrots into the ground, basically. Then I could go anywhere I want. How is this so difficult? So long as I'm not jumping all over your fucking roof or the roof of your car. There's plenty of space on this planet for all of us to have a little private plot of land that we can bequeath to our children if we so choose, and they do as well. Right? There's plenty of land on this planet for every new human being born into it to be able to sustain him or herself by growing, producing food, or creating things that other people want that will give him or sell to him for food. Or they will sell him their food for whatever that person is producing. There's plenty of land on this planet for all of us to be able to live in harmony, and which isn't to say that, there's not going to be crime or murder, but that's never going to go away. That's just is what it is. Your government can't protect you from any of those things. I many times I've stated that I just want to be left alone, and a lot of people agree with me. And then some people, people who don't realize that at heart they're really just authoritarians. They've been brainwashed with this authoritarianism. They think they can tell other people what to do, right? They come around and say, well, that's a utopia. People will take your stuff. You can't have a system like that, right? What system? There's not a system. It's just one tenant. Where did you get a system from? Just leave me alone. Where did you get a system from that? There's no system. It's just one tenant. But then they'll say, when I say, that I just want to be left alone, they're like, oh, people will come and get your shit. Well, how the fuck is that leaving me alone, dummy? I just want to be left alone. To choose to transact and cooperate with like-minded people that just want to be left alone. So let's put a system in place that protects our right to be left the fuck alone. Not a system in place that bothers us, that tags us, that puts fucking concentration camp numbers on all of us, brands us. Yeah, for now it's still external. It's still something that you hold in your hand, but eventually it's going to be tattooed on your skin. Right? Of course. Fucking prison planet. Say what you will about Alex Jones. I mean, he's 100% right. Prison planet. Right? Because capitalism. Maybe he doesn't himself realize that, or maybe he's a shill. I don't know. But that's what capitalism leads to. Logically. Obviously. So if it makes you feel good to call it something else once it's carried out to its logical fucking conclusion, you're incoherent. How? How is a capitalist, or all these capitalists in a capitalistic system, doing with their capital as the capitalist system affords them the freedom to do with their capital. How is that not capitalism? What the fuck? Thanks for listening.